I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. How in God's name am I supposed to get this kid to go home? No. Son of a bitch. You're back. Well, you're back just in time for me to read to you this incredibly long but well-written story that I can continue on. I mapped this out, and it turns out that there's like 4 more parts to this where I have to read for 2 hours apiece. It's exhausting, but welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. And this is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to keep reading The Legend of the Seventh Virgin by Victoria Holt. You want to hear about the author? Sure. Eleanor Alice Hibbert. Now, that's her real name. Born September 1st, 1906, and died January 18th, 1993. She was an English writer of historical romances. She published several books a year in different literary genres, each genre under a different pen name, like Jean Pleady for her fictionalized history of European royalty, Victoria Holt for Gothic romances, and Philippia Carr for multi-generational family saga. Want to hear fun facts? Yeah, let's continue learning about 19th century Gothic fiction. By the Victorian era, Gothic had ceased to be a dominant genre for novels in England, partly replaced by more sedate historical fiction. However, Gothic short stories continue to be popular, published in magazines or as small chapbooks called penny dreadfuls. The most influential Gothic writer from this period was the American Edgar Allan Poe, who wrote numerous short stories and poems reinterpreting Gothic tropes. His story, The Fall of the House of Usher in 1839, revisits classic Gothic tropes of aristocratic decay, death, and madness. Poe is now considered the master of the American Gothic. In England, one of the most influential penny dreadfuls was anonymously authored Varney the Vampire in 1847, which introduced the trope of vampires having sharpened teeth. Another notable English author of penny dreadfuls is George W.M. Reynolds, known for the Mysteries of London in 1844, Faust in 1846, and Wagner the Werewolf in 1847, and The Necromancer in 1857. Elizabeth Gaskell's tales, The Doom of the Griffiths in 1858, Lois the Witch, The Grey Woman, all employ the most common themes of Gothic fiction. The power of ancestral sins to curse future generations, and the fear that they will. In Spain, Gustavo Adolfo Becour stood out with his romantic poems and short tales, some depicting supernatural events. Today, some consider him the most read Spanish writer, after Miguel de Cervantes. I'm screwing all that up. Jane Eyre's Trial Through the Moors and Charlotte's... Oh, that's a different thing. In addition, I'm reading this straight off of Wikipedia. That's where I'm at now. I'm not even doing real research anymore. I'm just like, I get it from Wikipedia and just throw it on the page. In addition to these short Gothic fictions, some novels drew on the Gothic. Oh, thank God. That's the grandfather clock telling me to shut up and get us down to the library. We're going to continue reading this well-written but insanely long book. Well, there you go. Get yourself settled. Are you comfortable here in my home where I don't want you, but you keep showing up? Oh, good. Oh, look, you brought snacks. Sure you're going to be crunching the entire time I'm reading? That won't be disturbing. Then I went on to tell her about my last encounter with Johnny. From that to talk of life at the abbas. Oh, I never stopped talking of the abbas. Oh, I like to make her see it as I did, the odd winding staircases and stone cells where the nuns had lived. Oh, it was the old part of the abbas which interested me the most, but I loved it all. And when I thought of marriage, With David Killigrew, I thought of leaving the abbas, and that felt like parting with a lover. Yeah, you're in love with a house, said Granny. Well, 'tis safer perhaps to love a house than a man. If it be yours, then 'tis yours, and you will need have no fear of it betraying you. Judith had gone to bed early on account of a headache and had dismissed me for the night. It was 9 o'clock, and because I had a yearning to see Granny, I slipped out of the house and went down to the cottage. She was sitting, smoking a pipe, as always, and glad to see me. We sat and talked, and I told her that Johnny's attitude seemed to be changing, that I could not understand him. He had been a little cool lately, and there were times when I thought he was abandoning the chase, and yet others he seemed more determined than ever. Granny lighted 2 candles, for the twilight was on us, and my conversation, as usual, had turned to the house itself, when I suddenly startled by the movement at the window. I was just in time to see a dark shape move quickly by. Someone had been looking in at us. Granny, I cried, someone's outside. Well, Granny rose rather slowly, for she was no longer nimble, and went to the door. She turned to me, shook her head. There's no one there. But someone was looking in at us. I followed her to the door and peered into the dimness. Who's there? I called. There was no answer. Who could it have been? I asked. Who could have stood out there, peering in at us? And I wonder for, how long? It were likely someone has wanted to see me if I were alone, was Granny's comfortable explanation. They'll come back. That's if they want me to see me bad enough. The uneasy feeling of having been spied on stayed with me, and I could not settle down to talk, and it was growing late, I realized. It was time I went back to the abbas. I said goodnight to Granny and left her, but I kept wondering who it was who had looked through the window and decided not to come in. I had no opportunity of seeing Granny again until I made my decision. In a way, I told myself, that's a good thing, because it had been my decision. And I had to take it in with my eyes wide open. I had to bear the entire responsibility myself. Judith had been tiresome. I was discovering facets of her character, which I had not known before. She had a violent temper, which when it was manifested was more fierce for having been kept in check. I guess that the future in this house was going to be very stormy. Judith would not tolerate Mellyora's presence in the house much longer. And when Mellyora went, what of me? However, that was not the concern of the immediate future. Judith had one of her headaches, and I must brush her hair, and I must massage her forehead. Sometimes I hated the smell of eau de cologne that she used. It would always remind me of the servitude to this woman. How clumsy you are, Carly. It was a sign of her irritation when she used my surname. But she was surely trying to hurt me because she was hurt. You're pulling my hair. You're useless. Useless. Sometimes I wonder why I employ you. When I come to think of it, I did not engage you. You were found for me. What am I in this house? ... Question mark. I tried to soothe her. My lady, you are not feeling well. But perhaps you should rest. I hated calling her my lady. If Mellyora had been my lady, I should have boasted of my friendship with Lady St. Lawrence, but she would be Mellyora, not my lady to me. Mellyora, however, could never be Lady St. Lawrence while this woman was alive. I don't stand there like a fool. Braid my hair. Don't pull. I warned you before. She took the brush from me, and as she did, the bristles tore the skin of one of my fingers. What kind of brush is this? Making it bleed. I looked at it in dismay while she flung the brush across the room. You've been treated brutally, she mocked, and serve you right. Her eyes were wild. I thought, shall we in a few years' time have Lady St. Lawrence going out on the moor to dance when the moon is full? They were doomed, these Darrises, doomed by madness, by a monster, and Judith was one of the doomed. A bitter anger was in me that night, and I hated those that humiliated me, and Judith was humiliating me. I had better take care, she told me, and she would get rid of me, and she would choose her own maid. She was Lady St. Lawrence now, and there was no reason why she should be dictated to by anyone. I suggested that she have one of the soothing powders, which Dr. Hillard had prescribed to her, and to my surprise she agreed. I gave it to her, and the effect in about 10 minutes was apparent. The storm was passing. Docilely, she allowed me to get her to bed. I went back to my room, and although it was late, I dressed my hair in the Spanish fashion, putting my comb in my mantilla, and there was always soothed me, and it become a habit with me. With my hair thus, I would remember the ball and the dancing with Kim and how you told me I was fasting. Oh, and in the back of my mind was a dream that Kim came back. It was fond of me. By some miracle, he was the owner of the abbas, and we married and lived there happily ever after. As I sat at the window looking out of the moonlight, I felt a desire to go out to the stones, but I was tired. I took a book in order to soothe myself by reading and prop myself up on the bed, fully dressed, because I wanted to leave the comb in my hair. Reading never failed to comfort me. It reminded me how far I'd come and how I'd achieved what most people have said was impossible. I read on and on. It was past midnight when I heard the sound of footsteps creeping in my room. I sprang off the bed and blew out my candles. I was standing behind the door when Johnny opened it and came in. This was a different Johnny. I didn't know what had changed him. I only knew that I had never seen him like this before. He is quiet, serious, and there was a strange determination about him. "What do you want?" I demanded. He lifted a finger, warning me to keep quiet. "Shall I get out or shall I shout?" I told him. "I want to talk to you. I've got to talk to you." "I have no desire to talk." "Then you've got to listen. You've got to stand by me." "I don't understand you." He stood close to me with all truculence. Oh, that's a word I want to look up. Truculent. Eager or quick to argue or fight. Aggressively defiant. Okay, all right, well, there we go. All the truculence had gone from him. He was like a child, pleading with me, and this was strange with Johnny. "I'll marry you," he said. "What?" "I said I'd marry you." "Well, what game are you playing?" He took me by the shoulders and shook me. "You know," he said, "you know it's the price I'm ready to pay, and I'll tell you I'll marry you." Your family?" "Oh, they'll raise hell, but I say, to hell with the family." "I'll marry you, I promise." "Well, I'm not sure that I'll marry you." "Oh, of course you will. It was what you were waiting for, Karensa. I'm serious. Never more deadly serious in my life. I don't want to marry. Oh, there'll be trouble, but I tell you, I'll marry you." It's not possible. I'm going to Plymouth." "When?" "Oh, tonight. No. Already morning. Today, then. I'm catching the first train. I'm leaving at 5. Are you coming with me?" "Why this sudden decision?" "Well, you know. Why pretend?" I think you're mad. Well, I've always wanted you, and this is the way. Are you coming with me?" "I don't trust you." "Well, we gotta trust each other. I'll marry you. I'll get the special license." "I swear it." "Well, how do I know?" "Oh, look, you know what's happened. We'll be together, and once it's done, it's done. I'll marry you, Karensa." I want time to think about it." "Well, I'll give you till 4. Be ready. We're leaving then, and I'm going to go pack some things. You do the same. And then we'll take the trap to the station. It's time for the train." "This is madness," I said. He caught me to him, and I could not understand the embrace he gave me. It was made up of desire, passion, perhaps hatred. "Oh, it's the way you want it. It's the way I want it." And then he left me. I sat by the window, thought of the humiliation of the evening. I thought of the fulfillment of my dream, and it would come true the way I had dreamed it. I wasn't in love with Johnny, but some sensuality in him had touched something in me, and I was meant to marry and bear children. Children who would be St. Lawrence's. Already the dream was becoming more ambitious. Justin and Judith had no child. I saw my son, Sir Justin. I, the mother of the heir to the abbas. Anything was worthwhile for that. Marriage with Johnny, anything. I sat down, wrote a letter to Mellyora, and I closed one which I had asked her to give Granny. I had made up my mind, so I had left on the 5 o'clock train for Plymouth. Johnny was as good as his word, and shortly afterwards I became Mrs. Johnny St. Lamston. The days that followed our flight from the abbas still seemed something like a dream to me. Oh, it was only weeks afterwards when I returned to the abbas that Mrs. St. Lawrence, needing all my strength to fight for the place I intended to have, that took on reality. I was not afraid on the day we returned. There was scarcely any room for any feeling but triumph. Oh, it was Johnny who was afraid. I was to learn that I had married a weakling. During that early morning journey to Plymouth, I had made my plans. I was determined not to return to the abbas until I was made Mrs. St. Lamston, and I was determined to return to the abbas, and I need not have worried. Johnny made no attempt to evade his promise. In fact, he seemed as eager for the ceremony as I was, and was even prepared to keep his distance until it was over. And then we had a few days, weird, honeymoon in the Plymouth Hotel. Again, this is a book that's completely screwed up in its formatting. They must have just copied it straight from the actual physical pages without actually looking it over. So, a few days, honeymoon in Plymouth Hotel. Fine, whatever. Moving on with my life. This is what I get for buying something off of Amazon. Honeymooning with Johnny was an experience I do not particularly care to recall even now. Ours was a partnership, purely of the senses. I had no real love for him, nor he for me. Perhaps he had a grudging admiration for my tenacity. Oh, there were times when I believed that he was glad of my strength, but ours was a physical relationship, which, for those first weeks, was satisfying enough for us not to examine too closely the situation in which we had put ourselves. For me, this was the culmination of my most cherished dream. And out of those dreams had grown a new and more ambitious one. I longed passionately for a child. Oh, my whole body cried out for a child. A boy who would be the heir of St. Lamston. My son, baronet. During those days and nights at the Plymouth Hotel, for when Johnny and me, there seemed to be no meaning in life beyond our passion. I was wildly and hilariously happy because I sensed a growing power within me, and I could make my dreams come true. I was determined to conceive without delay, and I could not wait to hold my son in my arms. I did not tell Johnny of this, aware of my need, which equaled his for me. He completely misconstrued my passion, but ignited his and repeated to me often his pleasure in me. I regret nothing, ... nothing, he cried and laughed, reminding me of the aloofness towards him. You're a witch, Karensa, he told me. I always believed you were. That grandmother of yours is one, and you're the same. All the time you were mad for me, I was for you, although you treated me as if you loathed me. What about this person now, eh? Don't be so sure of yourself, Johnny, I warned him. And he laughed at me, yeah, and made me love to me, and I would never hold back, because I would say to myself, perhaps my son will be conceived now. Johnny could abandon himself to the moment without thought of the future. I understood later that this characteristic was a source of all his troubles. During those weeks in Plymouth, we were newly married, a couple, reveling in the possession of each other. He did not give a thought about our return until the day before we left for the abbas. Johnny had written to his brother telling him that we were returning and asking that Pelor be sent to the station to meet us. I shall never forget stepping out of the train. No, I was wearing a traveling suit of green velours, cloth trimmed with a black braid. My bonnet was of a matching green with black ribbons. Johnny had brought these clothes for me and declared that in the appropriate garments which he intended I should put Judith in the shade. Johnny seemed to hate his family, but I understood that was because at this time he was afraid of them. Oh, it was typical of Johnny to hate what he feared. Sometimes that's how racism starts. Sometimes he would make allusions to our relationship, which baffled me. I had forced him to this step, and he told me, but he didn't think that he was going to be sorry after all. Oh, we understood each other. Oh, we would stand by each other. And we had learned, had we not, that we were necessary to each other. Pelor's manner was subdued as he greeted us. After all, what did one say to a woman who had sat at the servants' table and suddenly become one of the ladies of the house? Pelor was quite at a loss. Good day, Mr. Johnny, sir. Good day, ma'am. Good day, Pelor. I had set the tone. Oh, I hope all is well at the abbas. Pelor gave me a sidelong glance. I could imagine him repeating the incident over supper tonight, and I could hear Mrs. Roltz, oh, my dear life, and Mrs. Saltz, oh, I ain't been so shook, my dear, since he came home in a mood one night. But the gossip at the servants' table was no longer my concern. We clopped along the road, and there was the abbas looking more wonderful than it ever was before, because I had now had a share in it. Oh, when he pulled up before the portico, Pelor told us that the old lady St. Larson had ordered that as soon as we arrived, we should be taken to her. Johnny was a little tense, but I held my head high. I wasn't afraid. I was Mrs. St. Larson now. Sir Justin and Judith were with her, and they looked at us in astonishment as we entered. Come here, Johnny, said Lady St. Larson, and as Johnny walked across the room to her chair, I was beside him. She was quivering with indignation. Oh, and I could imagine how she felt when she had first heard the news. Oh, she could not look at me, but I knew she had to fight hard to prevent herself from doing so. In my new clothes, I felt ready to face them all. After all the trouble you've caused, she went on, her voice quivering. And now, this. Oh, I can only be glad that your father's not here to this day. Mother, began Johnny, but she held up a hand to silence him. Never in my life has a member of my family so disgraced the name of St. Lamston. Oh, I spoke then. There's no disgrace, St. Lamston. We're married, and I can prove that to you. Well, I was hoping it was another of your escapades, Johnny, she said, ignoring me. This is worse than I expected. Sir Justin had come to stand beside his mother's chair, and he laid a hand on her shoulder and said calmly, Mother, what is done, and let us make the best of it. Karensa, I welcome you into the family. Well, there was no welcome in his face, and I could see that he was as horrified by the marriage as his mother was. But Justin was a man who would always choose the peaceful way. By marrying a servant in his mother's house, Johnny had created a scandal. But the best way of subduing that scandal was to pretend it didn't exist. I almost preferred Lady St. Lamston's attitude. Judith came to support her husband. You are right, darling. Karensa is a St. Lamston now. Her smile was warmer. All she wanted from the St. Lamstons was Justin's complete and undivided attention. Thank you, I said. We are rather tired after our journey, and I would like to wash. Oh, the train's so dirty. And Johnny, I should like some tea. Oh, they're all looking at me in astonishment. And I believe that I had Lady St. Lamston's grudging admiration, and that while she was furious with Johnny for marrying me, she could not help admiring me for forcing him into it. Oh, that's a great deal I should have to say to you, Lady St. Lamston was looking at Johnny. I put in, well, we could talk later, and then I smiled at my mother-in-law. We do need that tea. I slipped my arm through Johnny's, and because they were all so astonished, I had time to draw him from the room before they could reply. We went to his room, and there I rang the bell. Johnny looked at me with the same expression I had seen on the faces of his family, but before he had time to comment, Mrs. Holt had arrived, and I guessed that she had not been far off during that interview with the family. Good day, Mrs. Holt, I said. We should like some tea sent up at once. She gaped at me for a second and then said, yes, ma'am. Oh, I could picture her returning to the kitchen where they'd be waiting for her. Johnny leaned against the door, then burst out laughing. A witch, he cried. I've married a witch. Yeah. I was longing to see Granny, but my first interview was with Mellyora. I went along to her room and she was expecting me, but when I opened the door, she merely stared at me with something near horror in her eyes. Karensa, she cried. Mrs. St. Lamston, I reminded her with a laugh. Oh, you really have married Johnny. I have the marriage lines if you wish to see them. Why is she constantly trying to say, I can prove it? It's so weird. She's like just clutching these little marriage papers. So you want to see it? I swear to God, I'll show it to you. I held out my left hand in which the plain gold band was evident. How could you? Is it so hard to understand? This changes everything. No more Carly. Do this, do that. I am my ex-mistress, sister-in-law. I'm her ladyship's daughter-in-law. Think of that. Oh, poor little Karensa Carly, the girl from the cottages. Mrs. St. Lamston, if you please. Karensa, sometimes you frighten me. Oh, I frighten you? I looked boldly into her face. There's no need for you to be afraid of me. I can look after myself. She flushed, for she knew I was hinting that perhaps she could not. Her lips tightened and she said, so it would seem. And now you are no longer a lady's maid. Oh, Karensa, was it worth it? Well, that remains to be seen, doesn't it? I don't understand. Now you wouldn't. But I thought you hated him. I don't hate him anymore. Because he offered you a position you could accept? There was a tinge of sarcasm in her voice, which I resented. At least, I said, he was free to marry me. Oh, and I flounced out of the room, but after a few minutes, I went back. I had caught Mellyora off guard. Oh, she's lying on her bed with her face buried in the pillows, and I threw myself down beside her. I could not bear that we should not be friends. It's like it used to be, I said. No, it's quite different. The positions are reversed, that's all, and when I was at the parsonage, you looked after me. Well, now it'll be my turn to look after you. No good's gonna come of this. Oh, you wait and see. If you love Johnny, oh, there's all sorts of love, Mellyora. There's love, sacred and profane. Karensa, you sound so, flippant. Oh, it's often a good way to be. I can't believe you. What's happened to you, Karensa? Oh, what's happened to us both, I asked. Then we lay still on the bed, and we were both wondering what the outcome of her love for Justin would be. I could scarcely wait to see Granny, and ordered Mellyora to drive me to the cottage the next day. Oh, how I enjoyed alighting, dressed in my green and black, and I told him to return for me in an hour. Granny looked anxiously into my face. Well, my love, is all she said. Mrs. St. Lamston now, Granny. So you got what you want, eh? It's a beginning. Oh, she said, opening her eyes very wide, but she did not ask to explain. Instead, she took me by the shoulders and looked into my face. Yeah, you look happy, she said at length. Then I threw myself into her arms and hugged her. And when I released her, she turned away, and I knew she didn't want me to see the tears in her eyes. I took off my hat and coat and mounted to the towel-fat, and I lay there and talked to her while she smoked her pipe. She was different. Sometimes so absorbed in her own thoughts that I believe she didn't hear what I said. I didn't mind. I just wanted to open my heart and talk as I could to no one else. Oh, I would have a child soon. I was certain of it. I wanted a boy. A St. Lamston he would be. And Granny, if Justin doesn't have any children, my son will inherit the abbas. Oh, he'll be a sir, Granny. How do you like that? Sir Justin St. Lamston, your great-grandson. Granny stared intently at the smoke from her pipe. There'll always be a goal for E, lovey, she said at length. Maybe that's how you're meant to be lived. Maybe 'tis all for the best, the way things have worked out. And you love this husband of yours? Love, Granny? He's give me what I wanted. It's from him that I'll get what I want now. Remember that it couldn't have been without Johnny. And you think that's a substitute for love, Karensa? I'm in love, Granny. In love with your husband, girl? In love with the present, Granny. And what more can one ask? No, that would be more than that, could us? Who would need to question the means when the ends give us all we could wish for? Oh, I'd die happy, Karensa, if you could go on as you be at this moment. Oh, don't talk of dying, I ordered, and she laughed at me. Yeah, not I, my beauty. That were an order from one gives to orders. Now, we laughed only as we could laugh together, and I fancy that Granny was less uneasy than she had been when I first arrived. Oh, how I enjoyed my new position. Oh, I suffered no embarrassment. I had schooled myself on the role so many times in my imagination that now I was perfectly rehearsed and could play it to perfection. I amused myself and Johnny by imitating the sort of conversation which I knew was going on in the kitchen. Oh, I could give orders as coolly as old Lady St. Lamston, with a great deal more than Judith. Judith and I were actually friends. Sometimes I would dress her hair for her because she was now without a maid, but I clearly let her understand that this was a sisterly gesture. And I think the fact that I had married Johnny pleased her because she could not stop herself believing that every woman was after Justin. To have paired off with Johnny was therefore a comfort. Although it had been Mellyora who had eloped with Johnny, she would have been really delighted. She was inclined to relax with me, and I was certain that soon she would be confiding in me. With Judith's acquiescence, I had ordered that a new suite of rooms be prepared for Johnny and me, and had furniture. I hate that. And had furniture. I hate it when you say the same word twice in a row. Moved from other parts of the house to our apartments. The servants whispered behind my back, but this is what I prepared for. I knew that the Dowager Lady St. Lamston talked of upstarts and the tragedy of Johnny's marriage, but I cared nothing for her. She was old and would soon be of little consequence. I was looking to the future. I was waiting my time, eagerly watching for the first signs of pregnancy. I was certain that I would soon have my son, and when I could announce that I was expecting a child, my position in the household would change. Above everything, old Lady St. Lamston wanted a grandchild, and she despaired of Judith giving her one. The day I rode out to the fets to call on my brother, I I wanted to talk to him, for I made Johnny's promise that my brother should train as a doctor, and I should scarcely wait to tell Joe the good news. Mr. Poland's house, which had once seemed so grand, now looked modest. But it was a comfortable dwelling, standing back from the road in an acre of ground, which was occupied by stables, kennels, and outbuildings. At the windows, clean dimity curtains hung, and when I alighted, I saw these move. I knew that my arrival was being watched. One of the Pollock girls came out of the hall to greet me. Oh, coming to the hail, Dio, she cried, and I was sure that it had hastily put on a clean muslin dress in which to receive me. I followed her into the hail, another name for a parlor. Oh, well, thanks for telling me that. Which was clearly only used on special occasions. This was gratifying, and I took the chair which was offered me, glancing at the china dogs on the mantelpiece. I've come to see Joe, I said. Oh, yes, Mrs. St. Lamston. I'm going and telling him, if you'll excuse me for a minute or two. I smiled graciously as she went out, and I guessed that the story of my marriage had been the main topic throughout the countryside, and that Joe had become more important because of his connection with me. I was gratified. I was always pleased when I could bring honor to my family. I was studying the silver and china in the corner cupboard, and assessing its value, telling myself that the Pollets were, if not rich, comfortably off, when Miss Pollet returned to tell me that Joe had asked her to take me where he was working as he was busy. Oh, and I was a little deflated by this indication that Joe did not share the Pollets' respect, but I hid this and allowed myself to be taken to a room where I found him standing at a bench mixing a liquid in a bottle. His pleasure was real as I went to him and kissed him. He held up the bottle to show me. A new mix, he explained. Mr. Pollen, I reckon we got something that's never been used before. Have you? I said. I got news for you, Joe. He laughed. Yeah, oh yes, you and Miss St. Larston now. We all heard along about how you run off to Plymouth with Mr. Johnny. And I frowned. He would have to learn to express himself like a gentleman. My word, he went on, what a to-do! Oh, you and Mr. St. Larston and Hetty Pengaster all going off the same day. I was startled. Hetty Pengaster? Oh, hadn't E heard? She went away too. Regular howdy-do. Oh, I could tell E, the Pengasters, was in a rare state, and Saul Cundy were going to murder. That what he were, but there it be. Doll reckoned. He'd gone all the way to London. Alias said that's what her did want to go. Alias? I don't think that's a real word. I just think that's the book screwing up again. I was silent momentarily, forgetting the importance of my mission to Joe. Hetty Pengaster. Oh, how strange that she should have chosen to leave home the very same day that Johnny and I had left. So she's gone to London? I said. Well, no one's heard yet, but that's what they do say. Oh, there's a young fellow from London who was here in the summer, and Doll says he were friendly like with Hetty. Doll reckons that they did plan it while they were here, though Hetty didn't tell her exactly like. I looked at Joe, and his contentment with his life irritated me. I've wonderful news for you, Joe, I told him. And he looked at me, and I went on. Everything is different now. There's no need for you to continue this humble position. Well, he wrinkled his eyebrows and looked foolish. I've always meant for you to do something more, Joe, and now I'm in a position and I can help you become a doctor. Hey, you can tell Mr. Poland tonight. Oh, there'll be a lot of studying to be done, and I am going along to ask Dr. Hiller's advice tomorrow. Then, well, I don't know what you be talking about, Karensa, he said, with a flush spread slowly across his face. I'm a St. Lamston now, Joe. You know what that means? Joe put down the bottle that he was holding and limped over to one of the shelves. And there he picked up a jar containing some liquid and began shaking this absent-mindedly. I felt emotional watching him, thinking of the night when Kim and I had rescued him from the man trap and had a great longing to see Kim now. I can't see the difference it do make, he said, and I'm going to stay here along with Mr. Pollitt. Here's where I belong to be. A vet? When you could be a doctor? This is where I belong to be, he repeated. But you be educated, Joe. You could be a doctor. I couldn't be so. I'd be a vet, and here's where you belong to be, I finished impatiently. Oh, Joe, don't you want to get on? He looked at me, and his eyes were colder than I had ever seen them. I do want to be let alone. That's what I want, he said. But Joe, he limped towards me. Then he was close. He said, the trouble with you, Karensa, is that you want to be like a god. You do want to make rest while we dance to your tune? Well, I won't. See, I be here with Mr. Pollen, and here's where I belong to be. You're full. Joe Carley, I told him. That be your opinion. If I do be a fool, then 'tis a fool that I would like to be. I was angry. Here was my first real obstacle. I had known so well what I had wanted. Mrs. St. Lamston of the Abbas, her son heir to the tide, her brother the local doctor, her grandmother installed in ... say the Dower House. I wanted every detail of the dream to come true, and Joe, who had always been so meek, was opposing me. Angrily, I turned away, and when I abruptly opened the door, I almost fell over one of the Pollock girls who had been quite clearly been listening through the keyhole. I ignored her and ran into the room. I heard her say, Joe, you hate going away, be you? I waited for Joe to reply. Nay, Essie, you do know I'd never go away. 'Tis here with you and the work where I belong. I hurried away then, disgusted. I'd been married 2 months, and I was certain to have a child. I told no one but Granny when I first suspected this, and it was only when I was sure that I let it be known. My triumph exceeded my expectations. The first person in the Abbas to be told was my brother-in-law. I went into her room. Mother-in-law. I went into her room and knocked at the door. She was alone and none too pleased to be disturbed. I'm not free to see you now, she said, but she had never addressed me by name up to that time. I want you to be the first to hear my news, I replied coolly. Well, if you do not wish to do so, it is of little importance to me. You are kept in ignorance. What news is this? She asked. Shall I sit down? I asked. She nodded, not very graciously. I've got to have a child, I said. Oh, she lowered her eyes, but not before I had seen the excitement there. Dubbedness, it was for this reason that marriage was necessary. Dubbedness. It's supposed to be doubtless, I suppose, but it just says dubbedness. This damn book. I paid money for this book. I stood up. If it's your intention to insult me, I would prefer to go when I have told you that your assumption is correct. In birth of my child, I will prove that, and I suppose you will need proof before you believe me. I am sorry I believed it was right to tell you first. It was stupid of me. I walked haughtily from the room, and as I shut the door, I thought I heard her whisper, Karensa. I went into the rooms I shared with Johnny. I could see Granny. I would go to see Granny and soothe my wounded vanity in her company. But while I was putting on my coat, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Holt stood there. Her ladyship says she would be pleased if you would go with her, ma'am. And I was about to go out. I replied. I hesitated. Then I shrugged my shoulders. Very well. I'll look in my own way down. Thank you, Mrs. Holt. Knowing Mrs. Holt so well, I could see the words trembling on her lips. The airs. Like she was born to it. I opened the door of Lady St. Lamston's sitting room and stood there, waiting. Karensa, she said, and her voice was warm. Come in. I approached her and stood waiting. Do please sit down. And I sat on the edge of the chair, showing her by my manner that her approval meant little to me. What a turd. I'm pleased by this news, she said. I couldn't hide the pleasure which flooded over me. It is what I want more than anything in the world, I answered. I want a son. In a moment, our relationship changed. She deplored my marriage, but I was young and strong. I was even presentable, and it was only the people in my neighborhood, the lower orders, who needed to know whence I had come. I had been married 2 months and had already conceived a child, a grandchild for her. And all this time, there had been nothing from Judith. Old Lady St. Lamston was a woman who had again, I hate that, was a woman who had most of what she wanted in her life. She must quickly have come to terms with her husband's incontinence. Perhaps she accepted that as part of the needs of a gentleman. And as long as his wife's power in the house remained absolute, she was content. I could not imagine what her married life had been like, but I did know that some quality in her, some love of power, the desire to manage her own life, those are the people around her, was shared by me, and because each recognized this and the other, we were essentially allies. Why, I'm glad of this, she said. You must take care of yourself, Karensa. Oh, I intend to do everything to ensure having a healthy boy. Well, she laughed. Let us not be too sure that child will be a boy. If it's a girl, we shall welcome her. You're young. Boys will come. Oh, I long for a boy, I said fervently. Well, she nodded. Yeah, we shall hope for a boy. Tomorrow, I myself will burp. Oh, first burp of the show you the nurseries. It is long since there were babies. Burp again at the abbas. But I'm a little tired today, and I should like to show them to you myself. Tomorrow, then, I said. Our eyes met. This was a conquest. This proud old woman, who a short time before had been deploring Johnny's marriage, was now becoming quickly reconciled to her daughter-in-law, in whom she recognized a kindred spirit. A son for St. Lambston. It was what we both wanted more than anything else in the world, and it was in my power to give it to her. More, it seemed only mine. When a woman becomes pregnant, well, she undergoes a change. There's often nothing for her but the child which, as the weeks pass, she is aware of, growing steadily within her. She senses the changes in the child, the development of that small body. I was living for the day when my child should be born. I became serene, contented. My manner was more gentle. Dr. Hillard often called to see me and would find me with Mellyora in the rose garden sewing some, small garment, for I asked that she should help me with the layette. Lady St. Lambston put nothing in my way. I was not to be crossed. If I wanted Mellyora, I should have her. I must be consented and humored. I was the most important person in the household. Sometimes the situation would strike me as so comic that I would be overcome with silent laughter. Oh, I was happy, and I told myself that I had never been so happy in my life. Johnny! I cared nothing for him. His attitude had changed too, because for the first time in his life it seemed that he had approval of his family. He had sired a child, something which Justin had failed to do. When we were alone together, he would jeer at Justin. Oh, so perfect he's always been. I've suffered from Justin all my life. It is irritating to have a saint for a brother, but there is one thing sinners can evidently do more effectively than saints. He laughed. It embraced me. And I pushed him away. Get off me. Telling him to be careful of the child. Johnny stretched himself out on the bed, his head supported by his arms, watching me. Oh, you never cease to amaze me, he said. Nothing will convince me that I haven't married a witch. Remember it, I warned. Don't offend her, or she might cast a spell on you. She already has done that on me and the whole household, including our dear mama. Karensa, you witch. How did you manage that? I patted my swollen body. My ability to bear a child without delay. Well, tell me this. Do you ride out on a broomstick and practice fertility rites with your grandmama? Well, he's really just running with this witch joke. He's just not stopping. Never mind what I do, I retorted. It's the result which is important. But he jumped up and kissed me, and I pushed him away. Get off me. And he had no longer interested in Johnny. I sat stitching under the trees with Mellyora. She looked so pretty with her head slightly bent as she watched the dainty progress of her needle. I was transported back into my thoughts to those days that I had peeped at her in the parsonage garden, sitting with Mrs. Kello. How our positions have reversed. I remembered, too, what I owed to her. Dear Mellyora, to whom I should be so grateful for the rest of my life. I wished that she could be as happy as I was, but even as I thought that, I felt a clutch of fear in my heart. Happiness for Mellyora would mean marriage with Justin. Oh, but how could she marry Justin when he had a wife? Only if Judith died could Mellyora marry Justin. And if she did, if they had children, sons, her sons would take precedence over mine. My son, Mr. St. Lambston, Mellyora's Sir Justin. It was unthinkable, but there was no cause for anxiety. Mellyora would never marry Justin, and some instinct told me that Judith was a barren woman. I got a feeling it's going to happen. I can already see what the conflict's coming. It took over almost 300 pages to finally get to where the conflict is. The story's starting, finally. Here it is. Now, Mellyora is going to marry this guy against all odds, and then that's where her life is going to be in jeopardy. I see it now. Well-written, long book. I was longing for the time to pass. I could only be content when I held my son in my arms. At times, I was overcome by a fear that the child would be, a girl. Oh, I could have loved to have a daughter, a girl for whom I could plan. Perhaps as Granny had planned for me, but my dream would be not complete until I had a son. My son, mine, should be the owner of the abbas. I should have given it to him, and all the future generations would have my blood in them. So I must have a son. Granny, who is wise in such matters, believed that I would. The way I carried the child indicated it. She told me, what, because maybe she's got a wider stance? She told me, as the months passed, she became more and more sure, and so my happiness increased. I scarcely noticed what was going on about me. It did not occur to me that my good fortune must have its effect in one as near to me as Mellyora. Not even when she said, who would have believed that all this could have happened to you when you stood at the hiring stand at the Trinquelet? Did I understand what she was thinking? If this can come to you, why shouldn't my life change miraculously? It's like the love boat, except it's an abbas. It's like the love abbas. All your wildest dreams come true at the love abbas. But during those months, my child's gestation, the love which had been conceived by Justin and Mellyora was growing too. Their very innocence made it all the more apparent that none would be more aware of it than Judith. Oh, she had not engaged a lady's maid after my marriage. Doll did certain duties for her, and often I went along to dress her hair for some special occasion. One day, when she and Justin were dining with the Hemphills, I went to her room, as I had promised, to do her hair for her. I knocked gently on the door, but there was no answer. So I opened the door and I called, are you there, Judith? There was no reply. Then I saw her. She was lying on the bed, on her back, her face turned up to the ceiling. Judith, I said, still not an answer, and for a second or so I believed that she was dead. And the first thought which came to my mind was, well, now Justin will be free to marry Mellyora. But they will have a son, and he will take precedence over mine. Now I had an obsession too, my son. I approached the bed, and I heard then a heavy sigh, and I saw that her eyes were open. Judith, I said, you remember I promised to come do your hair? She grunted, and going close, I bent over her, and I saw that her cheeks were wet. Oh, Karensa, she murmured. What's happened? She shook her head. You're crying. Oh, why shouldn't I? If something's wrong, something's always wrong. Judith, tell me what's happened. He doesn't care for me, she murmured in a slurred whisper, and I guessed that she was scarcely aware of me. She was talking to herself. It has been worse since she came. Does he think I don't see? Is it clear, isn't it? They're crying out for each other. They would be lovers, only they're such good people. Oh, how I loathe good people, yet, if they were, I'd kill her. Yes, I would. Somehow I would. Oh, she's so meek and mild, is she not? Such a quiet, inoffensive little lady. Oh, so much to be pitied. Fallen on hard times. Father dies. Poor young lady. She had to go into this cruel world and earn her living. Oh, poor Mellyora. Such a hard life. Such a need to be protected. I would protect her. I said, hush, Judith. Someone will hear you. Who's there? She asked. Oh, it's only Karensa. Come to do your hair as promised. Have you forgotten? Oh, my God, that was a long stretch. That's 49 minutes. Why don't we take a little break? I don't know. Let's go someplace relaxing, like my basement, where I can play a guitar to you and let you know about the latest upcoming Penguin Random House books. Well, there you are. You made it down. Welcome to my creepy, drippy basement. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to be in a creepy, drippy basement and not just in my normal, creepy basement. There's a new book called The Rom-Con by Devin Daniels. It's It's a cute little book. You want to hear about it? Sure. The Modern Battle of the Sexes, about a journalist who hatches an elaborate plan to take down her professional rival. In rom-con, perfect for fans of How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Oh, I'm very familiar with that book. That's a lot of fun. Can't wait to read this. After a particularly brutal breakup, Cassidy Sutton has had it with dating. So when her grandmother gives her a 1950s dating guide entitled 125 Tips to Hook a Husband, she decides to turn the retro advice into an ironic What Not to Do article for Siren, the popular woman's magazine that she writes for. And who better to secretly test the old-fashioned tips on that than Jack Bradford, chauvinistic creator of rival men's website Brawler. She'll write an article that'll entertain female readers everywhere and embarrass their sexist nemesis at the same time. 2 birds, 1 stone. But her perfect plan soon comes to be anything but those vintage courtship tips. Cassie, I can see where this is going, was so quick to poke fun at it, they actually seem to, in italics, work. Calling her most closely held beliefs into question. Even worse, Jack isn't falling for any of her tricks. And it's not long before their, quote, fake, unquote, relationship starts to feel like the realest one in her life. As her cat and mouse game starts to spiral out of control, Cassidy has to decide if she's playing to win or if she's willing to lose it all for love. Cat and mouse, it's more like cat and also cat. That's The Rom-Con by Devin Daniels. It's paperback, $17, coming out November 7th. You can get it at Amazon, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's Target, and you know that Devin Daniels has finally made it when they can call up their grandmother and say, remember when you gave me all those tips on how to date people and I told you that you're sexist and I'm never talking to you again? Well, I made a book out of it. And I decided, you know what, maybe there's a chance that people in your generation didn't get it all wrong. Maybe there's a chance that even way back then, you could still find love at Walmart. With that, why don't we, I don't know, go back to the library and just read for another hour where I get exhausted and I'm ready to pass out because I don't breathe in enough air as I'm reading. Just get upstairs, goddammit. Well, now we're out of the basement. Get yourself settled. Let's get through the rest of this horse shit. Karensa, she laughed. The lady's maid who will now give us the air. That is something else against me, don't you see? Even Karensa, the girl from the cottages, can give St. Lamston an heir. And I'm barren. Barren woman. That's 2 barons in a row. The barren fig tree. That's weird. That is Judith. It is all dear Karensa. We must take care of Karensa. If Karensa is in a draft, remember her condition. It is funny, don't you see? A few moments ago, she was Carly. Oh, she was here on sufferance. And now she is holy, the mother-to-be of the sainted heir of St. Lamston. Judith, I said earnestly, what's wrong? What's happened? And as I bent over her, I knew, because I could smell the spirits on her breath. Judith, intoxicated, attempting to forget her misery in the whiskey bottle, exclamation point. Burp. You've been drinking, Judith, I reproached her. What if I have? Oh, it's foolish. Who are you, pray? Oh, your sister-in-law, Karensa. Your friend. My friend? Your friend. No friend of hers is a friend of mine. Karensa, the sainted mother. Oh, it's been worse since you married Johnny. Have you forgotten you're dining with the Hempfills, you and Justin? Let him take her. He'd rather. You're being foolish. I'm going to order some black coffee. Pull yourself together, Judith. You're going to go to the Hempfills with Justin. Oh, he will be here in an hour, and if he finds you like this, he will be disgusted. He's already disgusted. Well, then do not disgust him further. He's disgusted by my love for him. He is a cold man, Karensa. Why do I love a cold man? Well, I cannot tell you that, but if you want to turn him away from you, you're going the right way about it. She clutched my arm. Oh, Karensa, don't let him be turned away. Don't let him be. She began to cry quietly, and I said to her, I gotta help you, but you must do as I say. I shall order coffee for myself and bring it to you. Oh, it would not do for the servants to see you in this state. They gossip too much as it is, and I shall be back soon, and then I shall have you ready by the time you leave for the hempfills. I hate the hempfills, silly hempfills. Then you should pretend to like them. That is the way to please Justin. Oh, there's only one way of pleasing him. If I should have a child, Karensa. If only I could have a child. Perhaps you will, I said, hoping that with all my being that she never would. God. Oh, he's such a cold man, Karensa. Well, then you must make him warm. You will not do so by getting drunk. That much I can tell you. Now lie there until I come back. She nodded. You're my friend, Karensa, she said. You promised you were. I went to my room, and when I rang the bell, Doll answered. Bring me some coffee, please, Doll, quickly, I ordered. Coffee, ma'am? I said coffee, Doll. I have a fancy for it. Then she went away, and I imagined them discussing my fancies in the kitchen. Oh, well, a pregnant woman is supposed to have fancies. And then she came back with it and left in my room. When she had gone, I hurried along with it to Judith, and it was unfortunate that as I went in, Mrs. Holt should suddenly appear in the corner. If they suspected then for what purpose I wanted the coffee, they already knew that Judith was drinking. It was likely that they did, and how she would take whiskey from the house supplies without Haggerty's knowing. Then he would eventually have to tell Justin, if only to protect himself. It seemed, therefore, that she had only just begun drinking, and in that case it might be possible to stop her. As I poured the coffee, I made Judith drink it, and I asked myself, how much do servants know about our lives? How can we keep any secrets from them? May was a hot year, beautiful month, as fitting, I thought, and for the entry of my child into the world, the hedgerows were ablaze with wild flowers, and the blossom everywhere was wonderful. Mine, was not an easy labor, but I stoically welcomed the excruciating pain. I welcomed it because it meant that my child would be born soon. Dr. Hillard and the midwife were at my bedside while it seemed to me that the entire house was tense, waiting for the cry of a child. And I remember thinking that the agony of the walled-up nun could not have been greater than mine. Wow, what a dick. Yet I exulted in my agony. How different it was from hers, which was the pain of defeat, while mine was that of glory. At last it came, the long-awaited cry of a child. Oh, I saw my mother-in-law with my baby in her arms, and she was crying. That proud woman. And I saw the tears glistening on her cheeks, and I was afraid that something was wrong. My baby was crippled, a monster, or dead. But they were tears of pride and joy, and she came to the bed, and hers was the first voice I heard proclaiming the glad news. It's a boy, Karensa, a lovely, healthy boy. Nothing can go wrong, I thought. I have but to make my plans and my dreams become realities. This is like a weird self-help person. She's turned into a crazy self-help person. I am Karensa St. Lamston, and I have borne a son. There is no other male child to replace him. He is the heir of St. Lamston. But I could be defeated in small matters. I was lying in bed, my hair falling about my shoulders, wearing a white lacy jacket with green ribbons. Why is she trying to make this sexy? And a present from my mother-in-law. The baby was in his cradle, and he was bending over him, her face so soft with love that she was like a different woman. We have to think of a name for him, Karensa. Oh, she came to the bed and sat down, smiling at me. I said, I thought of Justin. And she turned to me in some surprise. But that was out of the question. Why? I like Justin. There's always been a Justin in the St. Lamstons. Well, if Justin has a son, he'll be Justin. We must save that name for him. Justin? Have a son? Exclamation point. Well, I pray every night that he and Judith will be blessed as you and Johnny have been. I forced myself to smile. Of course, I merely thought that there ought to be a Justin in the family. Oh, she's turning into an evil asshole. So there should. But the son of the eldest son. Well, they've been married some time. Yes, but there are years ahead of them. I hope to see a house full of children before I die. I felt deflated. Then I assured myself that the name wasn't important. What other names do you have in mind? She asked. Well, I was thoughtful. I had been so sure that my son would be Justin that I had not considered another name for him. Well, she was watching me, and knowing her to be a shrewd old woman, I did not want her to understand how my thoughts ran. I said spontaneous, Carleon! Carleon, she repeated. No sooner had I said it than I knew that the name I wanted for my son, if I could not have Justin, Carleon, it held significance for me. I saw myself mounting the steps of the portico in the red velvet gown. Oh, it was the first occasion when I had been absolutely certain that dreams could come true. That's a good name, I said. I like it. She repeated it, rolling it over her tongue. Yes, she said, I like it. Carleon John. Oh, the last after his father. How's that? Johnny for his father, Carleon for his mother. Yes, since it should be not Justin, that's what it should be. Oh, I felt a different woman. For the first time in my life, I loved someone better than I loved myself, and the only thing that mattered was my son. I have often made excuses for the wicked things I did by telling myself, they're for Carleon, and I kept assuring myself that to sin for the sake of one you love is not the same as sinning for yourself. Yet, deep in my heart, I knew that Carleon's glory was mine, and that my love for him was so fierce because he was a part of me, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, as the saying goes. Oh, he was a beautiful child, big for his age, big for his age. The only feature that he had inherited from me was his enormous dark eyes, yet there was a look of serenity in them, which mine had never had. And why, I asked myself, should they not be serene with a mother such as I to fight for him? Oh, he was a contented baby. He would lie in his cradle, accepting the homage of the family as his right, but yet not imperiously. And he was happy to be loved. Carleon loved everyone, and everyone loved Carleon. But I assured myself there was a special contentment in his lovely face when I picked him up. Lady St. Lamston discussed the question of a nanny for him. Oh, she enumerated a few likely village girls, but I rejected them all. A sense of guilt had come from me because of the absurd fear which I had, almost premonition, that something might happen to Judith and enable Justin and Mellyora to marry. I did not want that to happen. I wanted Judith to live and remain Justin's barren wife, for only thus could my son become Sir Carleon and inherit the abbas. I pictured the dreary waste Mellyora's life must be, but I shrugged aside my guilt. It was not a choice between my friend and my son, and what mother would not always choose her son to a friend, however close? All the same, I wanted to help Mellyora, and I had conceived a plan for doing so. I do not want him speaking with a village accent, I told my mother-in-law. But we have all these girls for nurses, she reminded me. I want the best for Carleon. My dear Karensa, so do we all. Well, I had thought of Mellyora Martin. I saw the astonishment beginning to draw on my mother-in-law's face, and I hurried on. She's a lady, and she's fond of him, and I believe she would be good with children. She would teach him as he grows older, and she could be his governess until he was ready to, go to school. She was considering the inconvenience of relinquishing Mellyora. Oh, she would miss her, and yet she realized the good sense of what I was saying. Oh, it would be difficult to find a nurse of caliber of the parson's daughter. That day, I discovered that the imperious old lady was ready to make sacrifices for her grandson. I went along to Mellyora's room, and she was very tired, having had an exhausting afternoon with Lady St. Lamston. She was lying on her bed, and I thought she looked like a daffodil which had been left out too long of the water. Poor Mellyora, the strain of her life was becoming too much for her. I sat on the edge of her bed and studied her intently. Has it been a very tiring day? I asked, and she shrugged her shoulders. I'll be back, I told her, and I went to my room and returned with some eau de cologne, which I had been used during my pregnancy, which I had learned from Judith could soothe the headache. I patted on Mellyora's forehead with a pad of cotton wool. Oh, what a luxury to be waited on, she murmured. Oh, poor Mellyora. My mother-in-law is a tyrant, but life is going to be better in future. She opened wide her lovely blue eyes, which had a hint of sadness and was beginning to be apparent. You are to have a new employer, a new job. Well, she struggled up, fear coming to her eyes. I thought, don't fret. You're not to be taken away from Justin. Never fear. And the devil in me whispered, no, while you are here and there is this hopeless love between you and Justin, he is even less inclined for his wife's company. And the less he's inclined toward her, the less likelihood there is of their having a child who could replace Carleon. Oh, and the thoughts came to me. I always wanted to be especially kind to Mellyora. So I said quickly, I'm going to be your employer, Mellyora, and you're going to be Carleon's nurse. Oh, we were hugging each other. And for a few moments, we were like those two young girls in the parsonage. Oh, you will be as his aunt, I said. There'll be no question of anything else. We are sisters, are we not? Well, we were silent for a while, and then she said, Life is awe-inspiring sometimes, Karensa. Do you see a pattern in ours? Yes, I answered. A pattern. Yeah, of selfishness. It turns out that this, cottage woman, she's gets help from Mellyora because Mellyora is a kind person. And Mellyora teaches her how to read and teaches her all this stuff, brings her into her life, treats her like a friend. And now she's turning on her like a turd. That's the pattern. Poor people are turds. Oh, there are invisible cords binding our lives together. Nothing will ever break them, Mellyora. We couldn't even if we tried. Nah, we shall never try, she assured me, Karensa. When I knew my mother was going to have a child, I prayed for a sister. I prayed fiercely, not just at night, but all through the day. Every waking moment. Oh, my life is a prayer. I created a sister in my imagination, and her name was Karensa. She was like you, stronger than I, always there to help me, even though there were times when I helped her too. Do you think God was so sorry to have me take my sister from me that he gave me you? Yes, I said. I think it was meant that we should be together. Then you believe as I do. You always used to say that if you want something, pray for it, live for it, it comes. Yeah, this is kind of like, what's that whole idea of like putting it out in the universe? The book was called The Secret. Basically, this is just The Secret. Before The Secret is even written. Except that it's evil. My granny says it comes, but there are so many forces which you cannot understand. Perhaps your dream is fulfilled, but you must pay for it. Perhaps you'll get your sister, but she will not be all that you hope she is. When she laughed, she was like the old Mellyora, who had not yet suffered the humiliations which a proud woman like my mother-in-law could not help inflicting on those she considered to be in her power. Oh, come, Karensa, she said. I'm well aware of your faults. Well, I laughed with her. I thought, no, Mellyora, you're not. You should be surprised if you could look into this black heart of mine. Black? Perhaps not entirely so, but not shining bright and pure. Tinged with gray. I was determined that I would make Mellyora's life easier for her. What a change Carleon had wrought upon the abbas. Oh, there was not one of us who was unaffected by his presence. Even Johnny had dropped some of his cynicism and had come to be a proud parent. My child was the whole meaning of life to me. Of course, Mellyora was more at peace than she had been for a long time. She was devoted to the baby, as there was times that I had feared he might grow to love her as much as he loved me. Lady say Lamson would soften visibly at the sight of her grandson, and the servants adored him. When he was in the garden, I knew they all made excuses to go out to him, and I guessed he was the only one in the house of whom they were not critical. There was, however, one person, perhaps two, who were less happy for this coming. To Judith, he was a continual reproach, and I suspected Justin too. I had seen Justin look with yearning at my son, and I could read his thoughts. As for Judith, she could not hide hers. Oh, there was the vivid resentment in her heart as though she were demanding of fate. Why can I not have a child? Strangely enough, she allowed me to become her confidant. Oh, she would have chosen me, and I could not imagine perhaps that she had felt that I understood her more than anyone else in the house. Sometimes I would go and sit with her, and I had a way of making her talk, which excited me, and which she found soothing. Oh, I continually remember Granny saying that it was wise to discover all one could, because of every scrap of knowledge it might prove useful at some time. And I could feign sympathy. Oh, I would lure her confidences, and when her mind was dulled by whiskey, she talked the more readily. Every day she rode out alone. Her purpose, I knew, was to buy whiskey from the various inns in the neighborhood. Oh, she had evidently realized the danger of using the house supplies. When Justin discovered the empty bottles in the cupboard, he was horrified by her secret drinking, and at first she was elated. Oh, he was so angry. I have rarely seen him so angry. He must care, mustn't he, Karensa, to be so angry? He said I would ruin my health. Do you know what he did? He took my whiskey away so that I shouldn't ruin my health. But the elation did not last, and I knew how much she had come to rely on her whiskey. Oh, I went to her room once and found her sitting at the table, crying over a letter. "I'm writing to Justin," she said. I looked over her shoulder and read, "My darling, what have I done that you should treat me so? Sometimes I think you hate me. Oh, why do you prefer that girl with her silly meek face and her baby blue eyes? What can she give you that I can't, comma, ... end quote. I said, you're not going to send this to Justin. Yeah, why not? Why shouldn't I? Well, you see him every day. Why would you want to write to him? Well, he avoids me. We have separate rooms now. Did you know it's because I'm a nuisance? He prefers to forget me. Things that have changed since you were my maid, Karensa. Oh, clever Karensa. I wish I knew how to manage my life as you do yours. You don't care much for Johnny, do you? But he cares for you. How strange. It's sort of a turnabout. Two brothers and their wives. And she began to laugh wildly. And I said warningly, the servants will hear. No, they're far away in the kitchen. Well, they're everywhere, I replied. Well, yeah, what would they discover? That he neglects me? That he wants the parson's daughter? Oh, they know that already. Hush. Why should I? Judith, you are not yourself. I am dying for a drink. He has taken away my one comfort. Karensa, why shouldn't I have my comfort? Oh, he has his. Where do you think he and that girl have gone, Karensa? Why, you're being foolish. You're imagining this. Oh, they're both too ... I paused and I added, too conscious of convention to be anything but friends. Friends, she jeered, waiting for the moment when they will be lovers. What do you think they talk about together, Karensa? Oh, the days when I shall no longer be here? Oh, you're overwrought. I could have a drink. I should be better, Karensa. Help me. Buy me some whiskey. Bring it to me. Please, Karensa. You don't know how I need a drink. I couldn't do it, Judith. Well, you won't help me? No one will help me. No, she stopped and smiled slowly. A thought had evidently occurred to her, but I did not discover what it was until a few days later. That was when she rode over to her old home and brought Farmy Pawnton back with her. Fanny had been a nursery maid at Dear East and had worked there in another capacity when there was no longer a place for her in the nursery. Fanny was to be Judith's new lady maid. The affairs of Judith and Justin were suddenly of no more interest to me. My son was ill. One morning I leaned over his cradle and found him in a fever. I was terrified and sent at once for Dr. Hillard. Carleon was suffering from measles, the doctor told me. There's no cause for alarm. It's normal, childish complaint. No cause for alarm. I was beside myself with anxiety. I was with him day and night, and I would not allow for anyone to nurse him. Johnny remonstrated me with, that's what happens to all children. And I gave him a scornful look. This was my son, who was different from all other children, and I would not bear that he should run the slightest risk. My mother-in-law was extraordinarily gentle to me. You make yourself, my dear. Dr. Hillard assures me it's just an ordinary childish complaint, and dear Carleon's attack is a mild one. Get some rest. I do assure you that I shall look after him myself while you do. Oh, but I'd not leave him. I was afraid that others would not give him the care that I could, and I sat by his cradle and visualized his death. The little coffin being carried to St. Lamston Vault. Well, visualization is what got her here. Don't visualize the death of your kid. Johnny came to sit beside me. Do you know what's the matter with you? He said. You want more children. Then you won't have all these alarms over one. What would you say to half a dozen little sons and daughters? Oh, he's just trying to guarantee at least half a dozen sex acts. Oh, you were meant to be a mother. It's done something to you, Karensa. Don't be flippant, I reprimanded. But when Carleon was better and I could think of more reasonably, I thought of a large family in the years ahead when I should be the grand old lady of the abbas. Oh, not with only Sir Carleon and his children, but others. My children, my grandchildren, and I could be to them what Granny B had been to me. It was an expansion of my dream. Johnny had given me a glimpse into a future which seemed good to me. Carleon suffered no ill effects and was soon himself again. He's walking and talking now, and it gave me the utmost joy to watch him. Johnny and I had slipped into a new relationship. We were as we had been during those early days of our marriage. There was passion between us. Oh, as fierce as there had been. On my side, it grew out of the desire to fulfill a dream. On his, for a woman he was half convinced was a witch. In the rose garden, Carleon was playing with a wooden hoop, guiding it with a wooden stick. That's weird. I've always seen that in cartoons, where it's just like a wooden circle, like a wheel, like a hoop, and then they just keep tapping it with a stick and running down the street. It seems really weird. As he bowled it along, Mellyora was sitting on the seat near Virgin's wall, sewing. And when I came into the garden, Carleon was now 2 years old and big for his age. He was rarely out of temper and was always happy to play by himself, although he would share the game with anyone who wished to join him. I often marveled that a man like Johnny and a woman like myself could have produced such a child. I was at this time 21, and I often felt as I went about the abbas that I had lived there all my life. Lady St. Lamston was visibly aging. She suffered from rheumatism, which kept her in her room a great deal, and had not employed another companion to take Mellyora's place because she no longer had any correspondence, nor did she wish to be read to as she had in the past. She wanted to rest more, and occasionally Mellyora or I would sit with her. Mellyora sometimes read to her. When I did, she was always would interrupt and would find ourselves talking, mostly about Carleon. This meant that I was gradually becoming a mistress of the house, a fact which the servants realized, and only occasionally did I see an expression flicker over their faces, which told me they were remembering that time when I had been one of them. Judith did not stand in my way at all. Oh, she'd sometimes spend days in her room with no one but her maid. Oh, that Fanny from over Doris, as the servants used to call her. Oh, Granny was not well, and I should have liked, but I was not worried about her as I had once been. It was my plan to set her up in a little house of her own near the abbas, with the servant to look after her. It was a subject I had not yet broached with her, for I knew that, at the moment, it would not be well received. Joe was engaged to Essie Puent, and Mr. Puent, who is to make him a partner on the day of the marriage. I felt piqued by Granny's glee in this state of affairs. She said, "Oh, both my little uns have done well from themselves. And I did not see how Joe's rise could be compared with mine. He's just a dumb vet." And I still felt a nagging irritation that he was not studying to be a doctor. My desire for other children had not yet been satisfied, but Granny had assured me that it was normal enough to have a gap of 2 or 3 years, and better for my health, too. I had all my life before me, so I was content enough. I had the perfect son, and with each passing month, I became more and more sure that Judith would never bear a child. Thus, Carleon would inherit the title and the abbas. And I would one day be the grand old lady of the abbas. Oh, that was the state of affairs that morning when I joined Mellyora and Carleon in the rose garden. I sat down by Mellyora and for a few seconds gave myself up to contemplating my son. He had been immediately aware of my coming into the rose garden and stood still to wave to me. Then he trotted over after his hoop, picked it up, sent it bowling, and glanced at me to see if I was watching. This was another of those moments which I should have liked to capture and preserve forever. Moments of pure happiness. And when one grows older, one learns that happiness, complete and unalterated happiness, comes only in moments and must be recognized and savored to the full. For even in the happiest life, the complete oh God, that came out of me. That was against my will. The complete joy, the happiest life. Complete joy is not always present. I burped so hard I lost my place in the book. That doesn't happen very often. That is the power of White Claw. I saw then that Mellyora was uneasy, and immediately the moment passed, for joy had become tinged with apprehension. "Something on your mind?" I asked. She was thoughtful. Then she said, It's Judith, Karensa." "Judith? Oh, of course it's Judith. Judith was the cloud which hid the sun. Judith stood across her like a path, like a colossus, preventing her passage along the river to love and contentment." I nodded. "Well, she's drinking far too much. Oh, I know she has a fondness for the bottle, but I believe Justin is aware of this and won't let her drink to excess. She's drinking too much in spite of Justin." Even the way in which she said his name was a revelation. The little pause, the hushed reverence. "Oh, Mellyora, I thought you betray yourself in 100 ways." "Yes," I said. I was passing her room today. The door was open and I heard her groaning, so I thought. I went in and she was lying across the bed in a drunken stupor. Oh, it's awful, Karensa. She didn't recognize me. She was lying there with a dazed look in her eyes, groaning and mumbling. I couldn't hear what she said. I was so worried I went along to find Fanny. Fanny was in her room. The room you used to have. She was on the bed and didn't get up when I went in. I said to her, I think Lady St. Lamson needs you. She seems ill. And she lay there looking at me in a horrid, sneering sort of way. Oh, is that so, Miss Martin, she said. And I went on. I heard her moaning, and I went in to go see. Pray go and do something for her. She laughed. Yeah, her ladyship's all right, Miss Martin, she said. Then I didn't know it was her ladyship you were interested in. It was horrible. It's a great pity that woman never came here. I was so angry, Karensa. Well, I glanced at Mellyora, remembering how she had fought for me when she had brought me to the parsonage from the Trillinket. Mellyora could fight when the need arose, and she would fight now. Any slur on the relationship between her and Justin was a slur on Justin. That was how she would see it. And I knew that there had been no consummation of this love between her and Justin. Oh, there would never be while Judith was alive to stand between them. Mellyora went on. I said to her, oh, you're insolent. And she lay there laughing at me. Oh, you give yourself airs, Miss Martin, she said. Oh, you might be your ladyship the way you act. But you ain't that. Not by a long chalk, you ain't. I had to stop her because I was afraid I was going to say something dreadful, something which I wouldn't be able to ignore. So I said quickly, oh, someone's supplying St. Lamson with whiskey, and I believe it's you. She jeered again, and as she did so, her eyes went to the cupboard, and I went over and opened it, and I saw them. Bottles and bottles. Some full, some empty. Oh, she's getting them for Judith when Justin has tried to stop her drinking. What can you do about it, Mellyora? Oh, I don't know. It worried me. Well, these sneers about you and Justin make me more anxious than Judith drinking. Well, we're innocent, she said proudly, and the innocent have nothing to fear. Well, I did not answer, and she turned to me fiercely. Oh, you do not believe me, she accused. I believe you. You tell me always, Mellyora. I was thinking of your words. The innocent have nothing to fear, and I was wondering how true they were. The next day, Johnny went to Plymouth, and family business. It was strange how he had seemed to have become respectable since our marriage. I could believe that in 20 years' time he would have lived down his reputation. Life was extraordinary. Justin, who had made the marriage his parents had chosen for him, was losing his reputation, for there was no doubt that the main interest in the servants' hall was now the affair of Justin, Judith, and Mellyora. Johnny, who had disgraced the family by marrying the servant, was proving himself to have chosen wisely, and indeed an ironic turn of events. And I wondered whether Johnny was unfaithful to me. I didn't greatly care. My position was assured, and I had everything I wanted from Johnny. When he returned, he brought with him the elephant. It was made of gray cloth. There were wheels on its feet. Can you imagine? That was a time when toys, you just make a sculpture. Like, here's an ape. You just put him on a little platform with some wheels. There you go. That's a toy. Enjoy. Go on. Play with it. It was made of gray cloth, and there were wheels on its feet so that it could be pulled along. I've seen bigger and better elephants since, but at the time this seemed magnificent. It stood for about 12 inches from the ground. It had 2 boot buttons for eyes, a magnificent trunk, a correspondingly grand tail, and a pair of soft ears. About its neck was a thin red leather band, and to it attached a red cord. Johnny came into the nursery calling for Carleon. Solemnly, our son undid the wrappings about the box, which seemed as big as himself, and he put his little hands up in the tissue paper wrapping there, and he revealed all its glory. Was the elephant. Carleon stared at it, touched the gray cloth, put his finger on the boot button eyes, and then he looked from me to Johnny. It's an elephant, darling, I said. Nellyphant, he repeated, wondering. Johnny took it out of the box and put the string to our son's hand. He showed him how to pull it along. Silently, Carleon pulled the toy around the room. Then he knelt down and put his arms about its neck. Nellyphant, he whispered wonderingly. My Nellyphant. I was conscious of a momentary jealousy because Johnny had given him something he liked so much. I wanted always to be the first of his affections. It was a trait I deplored, but I couldn't help it. Carleon loved his elephant. The toy stood by his bed at night. He pulled it along wherever he went. He continued to call it his Nellyphant, and it was natural that he was shortened to Nelly. He talked to Nelly, he sang to Nelly, and it was a joy to see his delight in the thing. My only regret was that it had not been my gift. Well, there was disturbing undercurrents in the abbas that summer. The situation had worsened since the coming of Fanny, who was not only supplying Judith with drink, but was working on her suspicions. She hated Mellyora. And between them, she and Judith were trying to make Mellyora's position at the abbas intolerable. Mellyora did not tell me of all the insults she had to endure, but there were occasions when she was so upset that she could not keep them to herself. I had never liked Justin because I knew he had never liked me. He believed I tricked Johnny into marrying me, and he was too much of a patrician to accept me willingly into the family. While he was always coolly polite, he never showed the least friendliness towards me, and I was inclined to think that he did not entirely approve of Mellyora's friendship with me. For him, I had little sympathy, but I had loved Mellyora, and I did not want to see her humiliated. Moreover, she loved Carleon, and he was fond of her. And she was an excellent nurse and would be a good governess for him. I really think that what I wanted for things to go on as they were, with myself virtually a mistress of the abbas, Mellyora in a position which she owed to me, and which put in her continual need for my protection. Justin, melancholy, in love with a woman who was forbidden to him, the victim of a love-last marriage. Johnny, my husband, fascinated me still, realized that there was a great deal about me which he did not understand, admiring me more than any woman had ever known. Myself, powerful, in possession of the strings which jerked my poppets. But Judith was the odious Fanny, and we're planning to get rid of Mellyora. People in love are apt to play the ostrich. They bury their heads and think because they see no one sees them. Even such a cold-blooded man as Justin could fall in love and be foolish. He and Mellyora decided they must meet in some place where they could be alone, and occasionally they would ride out, not together, and meet. Though never twice in the same place, I pictured them walking their horses, talking earnestly before they parted to come home separately. But of course, it was noticed that they both disappeared on the same afternoons. This was their only indulgence. I was certain, as I was of anything, that they had never been lovers. In fact, Mellyora might have been tempted, had her lover been of a more fiery temperament. The restraint would be on Justin's part. But such a situation, however determined the chief actors were to preserve their honor and do their duty, was like sitting on top of a barrel of gunpowder. At any moment there could be an explosion, and Fanny, perhaps Judith too, was determined that there would be. One morning, when I went down to the kitchens to give orders for the day, I overheard a remark which disturbed me. It was Haggerty who made it, and Mrs. Holt tittered her appreciation. Fanny had seen them together. Fanny knew Parsons' daughters were the same as any village sluts given half the chance. Wow, they said the word sluts. I wasn't expecting that in this book. Fanny was going to find out the truth, and when she had, someone was going to be sorry. You could trust Fanny. There wasn't much she missed. Burp. There was silence when I walked into the kitchen, and mingled with my apprehension for Mellyora was my pride in the manner in which my presence should subdue them. I gave no hint that I had heard what they were saying, but merely proceeded to give orders. But when I went upstairs, I was thoughtful. If Fanny did not go soon, there was going to be trouble, which might result in Mellyora's being obliged to leave the abbas. What would happen then? Would Justin let her go? Often a decision could be forced, and when it was, how could one be so sure in which way the people would act? Fanny must go. But how can I dismiss Judith's maid? Well, I went to Judith's room. It was early afternoon, and I knew that after luncheon she retired to her room to drink herself drowsy. I knocked lightly at the door, and when there was no answer, knocked again, more loudly, and I heard the clink of glass and the shutting of a cupboard door. Still, she kept up the pretense that she was not drinking. "Oh," she said, "it's you. I came in for a chat." As I came closer to her, I could smell the spirits on her breath and noted the glazed look in her eyes. Her hair was untidy. She shrugged her shoulders, and I set a chair before the mirror. "Let me dress your hair, Judith," I said. "I always like doing it. It's what I call good-tempered hair. It does what you want it to." She sat down obediently, and as I took out the pins of her hair and fell about her shoulders, and I thought how vulnerable she looked. I massaged her head as I used to and closed her eyes. "Oh, there's magic in your fingers," she said in a soft, slurred voice. "Judith," I said softly, "you are very unhappy." She did not answer, but I saw her mouth drooped. "I wish there was something I could do. I like you to do my hair." I laughed. "I mean something to help you be happier." And she shook her head. "It is wise, all this drinking," I went on. "Fanny gets it for you, I know. It's wrong of her. You've been worse since she came." "I want Fanny here. She's my friend." Her mouth was obstinate. "A friend who smuggles drink to you, and Justin is so anxious that you shouldn't drink when he wants to see your health improved?" She opened her eyes and they flashed momentarily. "Does he? Perhaps he would rather I was dead." "Oh, what nonsense. He wants you to be well. Get rid of Fanny. I know she is bad for you. Oh, get well and strong. If your health were better, you might have a child, which would give Justin so much pleasure." Well, she turned around and gripped my arm. Her fingers burned my skin. "You don't understand. You think you do. Everyone thinks they do. They think it's my fault there's no children. What if I were to tell you that it's Justin's?" "Justin's, you mean?" She released me and shrugged her shoulders, turned back to the mirror. "Oh, what does it matter? Just brush it for me, Karensa. That soothes me. Then tie it back and I'll lie down and sleep a while." I picked up the comb. What did she mean? She was suggesting that Justin was impotent? I felt great excitement. If this were so, there would never be any danger of anyone displacing Carleon. Oh, the problems of Mellyora and Justin were forgotten before such an important issue. But how much trust could I put in Judith's wild statements? I considered Justin, so cool and aloof. The love for Mellyora, which I was certain had never been consummated. This is due to an inability rather than morality. I had to find out. Then I remembered the history of the Derice family, the story of the monster and the curse. Oh, I wanted to know more about that family. "Judith," I began, but her eyes were closed and she was already half asleep. I could get little out of her now, and then I should not be sure how true it was. I remember that when I had been her maid, she had often talked of her old nurse, Jane Carwillan, these names, who had been with her family for years, had been nurse to Judith's mother, and I had heard Judith say that she had left the family now, but lived in a cottage on the Derice estate. And I made up my mind that if I rode over to Derice and had a talk with Jane Carwillan, I might learn something of impotence. The next day, that's a weird conclusion to come to. The next day, I left Carleon with Mellyora and rode out to the moor. At Derice Tor, I paused to look down at the house. A magnificent mansion built in a Cornish stone, surrounded by its park, which had caught a glint of sunshine on the fish ponds. I could not help comparing myself with Judith, who had been born to all the luxury that was now one of the most miserable women on earth. While I, born to poverty in a fisherman's cottage, had become Mrs. St. Lamston. I was continually making comparisons, continually congratulating myself on my achievements, and I told myself that my character was strengthening, and if it was hardening too, well, hardness was a strength. And I rode down toward Derice Estate, and on my way met some workmen who I asked to direct me to Mrs. Carwillan's cottage. In a short time, I found it. I like that she walks up to the workmen, and they're like whistling at her and catcalling and stuff, and then they give her directions. I tied my horse to a fence and knocked at the door. There was a short silence before I heard slow footsteps. Then the door was opened by a little woman. Her back was bent, and she walked with the aid of a stick. Her face was wrinkled, and the skin of a torrid apple. And she peered up at me through overhanging, unkempt brows. Forgive my calling," I said. "I'm Mrs. St. Lamston from the abbas." She nodded. "I know. You be Karensa B's girl." "I'm Judith's sister-in-law," I said coolly. What do you want with me? She demanded. I to talk to you. I'm anxious about Judith. Come in then, she said, becoming slightly more hospitable. I stepped down into the room, and she led me to the high back settle in front of a turf fire. The fireplace was like a cave in the wall. There were no bars to keep in the fire. It reminded me of the fireplace at Granny's cottage. Oh, I sat down beside her and said, what be wrong with Miss Judith? And I decided that she was a forthright woman. So I must pretend to be forthright too. I said bluntly, she's drinking too much. That remark shocked her. Oh, I saw her lips twitch, and then she pulled thoughtfully at the long, stiff hair which grew out of a wart on her chin. Wow, they're really trying to make this woman very unattractive. And I come because I'm anxious about her, and I thought you might be able to advise me. How so? If, I said, she could have a child, I believe it would help her. And if she would not drink so much, her health would improve. I've spoken to her about it, and she seems to despair and think that it's impossible for her to have a child. You know the family well. That's 4 dots with an exclamation. Okay, fine. They had a barren family, she answered. There have always been this kind of trouble. They don't get children easily. There's some is cursed that way. I dared not look at her. I was afraid the shrewd old woman would read the satisfaction in my eyes and understand the reason. I've heard there's a curse in the family, I ventured. I heard that long ago a Derice gave birth to a monster. She blew with her lips. There be wild tales in these old families. The curse be no monster. It's the barrenness and the drink. The one do go with the other. 'Tis a sort of despair in them like. Oh, they say 'tis in the family and not our sons, and 'tis like they've made up their minds to be barren, and so they do so. So they say, and there's some of us that can't resist the drink, so they don't resist it. Oh, all right, so that's a family curse, I said, and after a sharp pause, you think it's unlikely that Judith can have a child? Wow, who can say? But her have been married for some time, and far as I know, there be no sign. Her grandmother did have 2, reared one and lost the other. He were a boy, but not strong. My young lady's mother were a Derice. Her husband took the name when he did marry her to keep our family alive. You see, it gets harder for them, it do seem. My young lady were so much in love, and I remember how excited she were when he rode over. We said, surely love like that will be fruitful, but it don't look like it. No, I thought, she will have no sons. Her relationship with Justin has turned sour now, and it'll be my Carleon who will have the abbas. I was glad I had ridden over to see Jane Carwillan. No one could say definitely that Judith and Justin would not have a son, but my spirits were high because I knew it was unlikely that they would. And this drinking, murmured the old woman, shaking her head. Oh, it don't do no good. It's been worse since Fanny Pawton came to her. Oh, Fanny Pawton's with her? Yeah, she came as a lady's maid, don't you know? Burp, she shook her head sadly. Nah, I don't like that. I never could abide Fanny Pawton. Yeah, nor I. I am certain that she smuggles spirits into the house. Oh, why didn't her come to me? I would have told her. 'Tis long since I've seen her. Tell her I be missing her. There was a time when she'd ride over regular, but lately... Well, it may be that Fanny has come, and I should like to send her away. Judith won't hear of it. Well, there's always loyal to them that served her, and you do say she has been worse since Fanny came. That ain't me to wonder to see how. Yes, I prompted. Jane Carwillan leaned nearer. That Fanny Pawton be a secret drinker, she said. Oh, my eyes sparkled. Let me find her the worse for drink, and I should have my excuse. 'Tain't often that you find her drunk like, she went on Jane, though there be times when I do let go, and I would always see her coming, a slyness, a look in her eye, a slackness. Oh, I did know it. I tried to catch her at it, but I were always too late. She'd shut herself in her room, saying she wasn't well, and then heard herself drink herself silly, I do believe. But in the morning, she'd be up right as rain, a sly one, Fanny Pawton, and bad for my young lady. Oh, there be a way these drinkers do have. They always want everyone to be just like them. Oh, if I found her drunk, I could dismiss her, I said. Now the old woman gripped my hand. Her fingers scraped my skin lightly, like she was a repulsive bird, I thought. You watch the sign, she whispered. If you be smart, you may catch him. You be on the watch. Well, how often do these drinking bouts take place? Well, I don't believe they hold out longer than a month or 6 weeks. I should keep watch. And I know it'll be the best thing possible for my sister-in-law if I can rid her of this woman. Well, the old woman said that she'd give me a glass of her elderberry wine, and I was about to refuse, but I could see that that'd be unwise. We were sealing a pact. We were in agreement about the undesirability of Fanny. Well, that seems like a good place to stop. Why don't we retire to the smoking room, where perhaps you could enjoy a cigarette? The birds that my wife put in cages down there, all of them with lung cancer, and we can review what the hell we just read. Well, there you are. Come down here and get yourself settled. Smoke a cigarette here amongst all the birds in cages that my wife has put all over the smoking room. It's ridiculous. They all have lung cancer. I said that earlier. It's a bit. I love this bit. I just keep saying this bit over and over. Let's talk about what we just read while we enjoy a tobacco product. Karensa gets married to Johnny for some reason. Johnny's just probably doing it because he's got a grudge against his family, even though he's scared of them. And this is his way of kind of acting out. It doesn't matter to Karensa because it's all part of her plan. She's been doing the secret thing where you just make wishes to the universe and the universe gives you what you want. So it's kind of all part of her plan. She's been going to marry Johnny, and she's going to get pregnant with a boy and have her life solidified as an important member of the abbas. No one is going to take her out of the abbas. Lady St. Lamson hates the whole thing, but she's old as hell, so who gives a crap? She's going to die soon, so you're not worried about her. But it's Johnny's mom, Judith, Karensa's old boss, has warmed up to it after a while, after she finds out especially that Karensa's pregnant. Then she just wants a little scoop of ice cream in the house, just to coddle over, just enjoy or whatever. So she turned around pretty quickly, and that's great. As soon as Karensa's pregnant, she doesn't give a shit about Johnny, and he makes moves, but she pushes him away, saying, like, watch out for the baby. Come on, stop putting your penis in there, because the baby's too close to your penis. Don't do that. She decides to use her new position to get her brother Joe out of the whole animal doctor game and into the human doctor one, but he's not interested, which pisses her off. He wants to be a vet and stay that way. Also has to do that he's in love with one of the daughters and hang around his work. That pisses off Karensa because she wants her vision from the book The Secret to work out exactly as she planned it. Weirdly, Doll snuck off to get married on the same day, but Karensa doesn't care. She thinks it's weird, and I got a feeling it's going to come back to haunt at some point. You wouldn't make a point of having like a different servant go off and get married to somebody else unless it comes around for some reason. Karensa realized that the tables have turned with her and Mellyora. Now she is the lady of the house, and she has a forced friend to follow her around, especially when she's got her watching the baby. So too bad she can't teach Mellyora a skill that she doesn't already know, like reading. Maybe she can teach her skills about, like, hanging out with your old mom or something. Another kink in her plan, Mellyora still is lusting over Justin. Karensa realizes that if that were to work out somehow, there could be potentially a boy baby that would trump her own boy baby, and so we got some foreshadowing. And weirdly, Karensa talks about how Mellyora is so nice and so sweet that she hated it, and that if she could, she'd kill her, if I read that right. Maybe I kind of went off into my own little world. After 2 hours of reading, I spent a whole Saturday doing this. Then, beyond that, she just kind of starts to go down the tube. She just kind of gets darker and darker. What becomes kind of a passive control thing where she just really doesn't want Mellyora to hook up with Justin. She's like looking into it and finding out maybe Justin's impotent. Maybe I don't have to worry about it. And then also, Justin's wife is getting like she's drunk all the time and stuff, so she's kind of declining. Well, she can't have Justin's wife die or anything because that just opens it up for Mellyora to get married to Justin. So then now she's got to make sure she stays alive. So now she's scheming to try and get rid of this other helper that's an alcoholic that's also giving her alcohol. It's just kind of getting all over the place. But the thing is, now a little over halfway through the book, the story is finally picking up. I say this as if I don't like the book. The book is actually really good. It's well written. It's at a good pace. You're building up, you're following Karensa through her life and how she works her way up, and it's all kind of believable. So they're doing a really good job with this book. No complaints. For me as the person reading it, oh my God, it's the longest book in the world. But I actually enjoy reading it if I just didn't have to do it with my mouth out loud. So we're at a good spot where someone you're empathizing with, who's put in a position because of trying to support her family to get out there and get this job at one of these places, is now suddenly working her way up the ladder, and she's slowly getting darker and more controlling. It's a pretty good story. I'm kind of surprised that I don't know what to expect out of a gothic romance, but this is better than I thought it would be. I just hate that I have to read all of it out loud with my mouth. Well, with that, hopefully you don't come back next week, and then I don't have to read this anymore. I can just read it quietly with my eye mouth, my little eye mouths, and just be quiet and read it and not be so exhausted. So with that, I'll probably see you next week. Guess I will. And I thanks for listening. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people. Not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com, which just points you to my link tree. Everything's on the link tree. Just go to the link tree if you want to see where I am. And of course, link tree has the dumbest URL in the world. linktr.ee/nuzzlehouse. It's the dumbest thing. If you go to nuzzlehouse.com, it's just going to reroute you over there after giving you some weird error about it not being secure. I hate it. I hate the internet. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly. glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdling or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.